Hello, guys. Welcome to the Savvy Show on RBN. Tonight, we are continuing the rest of the solutions panel. It'll be just me and Eric tonight. So, this is solutions panel part two. So, shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. And tonight, we're going to get started with talking about the money that's in politics because that's a question that's come up multiple times. Like, what do we do about the money? Like, what about the money? So, we're going to start with that, and I'm going to hand it over to Eric.
Hi. Oh, the first thing I wanted to note is I got a better microphone. I was listening to the show last time, and that was brutal. So it's like a pro tip. Don't try new equipment right before you go on. it and yeah, I see some friends in the chat and whatnot. But to get into it, yeah, that's like the big question. It's like, what about the money? And sometimes I'll hear these discussions on the lefty shows, and it seems like sometimes they'll talk about in depth, all kinds of details and what's wrong, and it just seems like more often than not the money doesn't even come up, and I just feel like big money runs everything, and it needs to be the focus. And I feel like that needs to be the focus, and the whole solidarity in terms of that whole thing of it's the top 0.1% versus the rest of us, and I just feel like we need to focus on that. I was watching your roundtable yesterday, and you were talking about JB was saying we got to get rid of capitalism. There's a real it's the problem. And so I guess I'm wondering like how do we get there from here? And people talk about we need a real revolution. And so it's like, what do we mean by that? What does that revolution look like? Because there's kind of this concept of a struggle, or I mean, sometimes people even talk about violent struggle and revolution. And I guess me personally, I just don't see how that happens. How like even if you had like a more direct kind of physical struggle, and let's say it was like wildly successful, and you took over a city and started making headway. I mean, what would the U.S. government do? They would declare that city like a terrorist zone, and like they would nuke it. I mean, and so to me, I feel like what we need is real democracy, and real democracy as in, one person, one vote, and not what we have now, which is $1, one vote.
Right. I think a lot of it goes back to that list of demands.
Mm-hmm.
Having people that sign on, and I think everyone should do this. Like when you see like candidates come to your district and ask you to vote for them, all of us need to have a list of demands. Like we don't owe them our vote. Like they need to give us something. And I think if people go into it with that mindset, I think that's the start of it, right? I think that's a big part of the problem, because when I talk to a lot of people that vote, they're not really asking for anything. I've noticed that. It's like their ask is, I just want whoever is running in my party. Like I'm Republican, so I'm going to vote for the Republican, or I'm Democrat, so I'm going to vote for the Democrat, which one wins the primary, right? And I think that's a big part of the problem. Like a lot of times we're not even asking for anything. Now, obviously Bernie Sanders changed that like greatly and made us realize we need to be asking for more than we thought we should, right? So I think that's where you start. And then in reference to these movements, I think it is incredibly important that we need to reach out to people who have been a part of mass movements in this country and honestly ask them how they did it. And I'll give a good example. So, civil rights movement. Now, obviously, a lot of the leaders, they're gone, right? They were either killed or they've passed away. But let's remember all of the civil rights activists that were with them. A lot of those people are still alive today. In fact, I saw one of them recently, and you're gonna laugh at me here, guys, but I was watching, you know, Real Housewives, and there's a side show that they've done for Real Housewives of Atlanta, and it's Portia's story and her family. And I saw something that I really didn't realize before, that she is actually the granddaughter of Herschel. Let me pull this up really quick. I want to make sure I get this right.
We need the Real Political Activist Show. Real Political Housewives. I don't know.
Well, no, I mean, I know it's a Hosea Williams. So let me pull this up because I want to share this with people. Just going to share my screen
God,
here.
can you imagine if there was like a reality show about activists?
Right, but like this show in particular, there actually was a couple of serious segments about the activism. And again, I didn't realize this, but Hosea Williams. So this is what came up in the show, that this is Portia's grandfather. And so who is Hosea Williams? Let's go down and look. Hosea Williams described himself as the thug of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Martin Luther King affectionately called him my wild man, my Castro, in recognition of Williams' skills as a protest organizer. So he actually organized and marched with Dr. King back in the day. He's not alive now. But what was interesting in that episode was that his daughter, who was a part of this show, the same show, she has continued to do those things. She actually has the largest food pantry in the region. And they did a whole episode where they focused on the mutual aid. And so, again, this was all new to me. I've watched Housewives before, but they focused on the mutual aid. And so they had this brand new building, and they showed where all the food was and all these different communities that they've helped. And I said to myself, why are we not reaching out to these activists that participated in the civil rights movement? Why are we not reaching out to those people and asking them, how did they do it? And I think there's no shame in asking that question. So it's a long story here about him. There's a lot of things that he did. I'm not going to go through all this tonight because it will take a while, but I highly recommend, and I can put this in the chat, I highly recommend that you look him up, because like I said, when we watch those videos, those civil rights videos, you see all the people that were with Dr. King. And I'm talking about even the people that were on the buses, the Freedom Riders. Like, some of these people are still alive. And so I think that we need to reach out to those activists, and some of them are still doing activism till this day. We need to get in touch with Angela Walker uh, and ask her, because she was a big part of the women's liberation movement, right? We need to ask her, like, how did you do it? How did you do it? What were some of the pros? What were some of the cons? What did you learn from the experience? Like, how were you able to mobilize that many people and continue to protest and continue to boycott for years? How did you do it? And also, while you were doing those things, there was some type of mutual aid set up, because think about it, if you're protesting all that time, you're not at work, right? So how in the world did you organize a movement that large? So I think that should be our second step, contacting those people. And I'm sure if we looked around on Google, we could find them.
No, definitely a strong agree on that. Now, actually, if you want to share my screen, it's kind of, so I'm kind of getting at this idea of a different kind of politics, and for lack of a better name, I'm calling it for the moment, radical electoral politics. And the idea is like we're saying, to have a list of demands. And then, when you have this list of demands, it's like what I'm proposing is just really trying to go hard at candidates, at representatives, and essentially like not taking no for an answer, and so it's to ask any candidate or representatives, do you support it, what are you doing about it, and if they're not on board with it, I just think we should be coming out and calling them corrupt, yell it at them, protest it, put it on signs, follow them into the bathroom. I mean, it's it's they work for us, or they're proposing to work for us, and and none of this, certainly can or should be construed as supporting Democrats, whether it's the Squad or any of the others. I mean, they've revealed to us, what they are, who they are, and who they work for, and it's not us. So I'm saying, provide zero support for them, no money, no votes, no praise. I mean, let's not be, praising them for our crumbs, for the crumbs that they propose to give us. And then on the other side of that, is provide, all the support we can to third party candidates, to independent candidates. And, the anyone who's serious, I mean, you can tell when these Democrats were running that they weren't for real. Is that how many times did you hear them call out sitting Democrats as corrupt? How many times did you hear them talk about big money or taking the money out? Our representatives are corrupt. I mean, Congress is a corrupt cesspool of legalized bribery. And, if you polled the American people and asked them that question, do you think Congress is a corrupt cesspool of legalized bribery? I mean, the yeses would be like up in the 90-95%. I mean, people know this. People get this. But I feel like they're waiting for a path to someone, to really come in and be serious about dealing with the money, dealing with the corruption, and just not taking no for an answer. And the last point I have on this one, be relentless about pointing out the real source of our problems. It's the billionaires and the mega corporations. It's the top 0.1% versus the rest of us. It's big money, and big money is the fight.
Yeah. One of the things I put this in the chat too for people to see this as well, because someone had mentioned this before, to check out Revolution Now. It's another podcast on YouTube. It doesn't seem like he appears on video, so go into this looking at it as like an audio, just FYI. But there's a podcast called Revolution Now. I'm gonna share this really quick. You see if it'll let me do this. Well, let me share the screen while that's. Yeah.
Oh,
well,
you can just clear mine.
Okay. Well, let me. Okay. So there's a podcast called Revolution Now, which apparently like talks about a lot of things we're complaining about, like the money, the capitalism, and solutions. So this is another resource that I think we can use, and I would like to try to see if I could get him to come on. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't look like he appears on camera, but that's fine. I understand that sometimes people can't because of their whatever.
Is that Roger Meadows? No.
No. But I think that's the thing too, and I'm actually going to mention this later on my show tonight. Some of the things that we're looking for are out there. We just don't know about it because a lot of these people are heavily suppressed. Heavily suppressed. Like, until I was told about this podcast, I did not know about it. I'd never heard of it. So there you go. But it's called Revolution Now. And I'll put the link in the chat again, because I keep hearing people say this. And I heard people on Brianna Joy Gray's podcast, they were saying the same thing. Like, Brianna Joy Gray was like, well, what do we do? What do we do? How do we organize? How do we do these things? There are people out there who do know how to do it and are educating people how to do it. The problem is you have to find them. They're not going to come and find you. This is something I have noticed myself. Most of the time, they are not going to come to you. We have to find them. And that's really difficult to do sometimes on YouTube because, like I said, a lot of these people are heavily, heavily suppressed. So that is a good resource that I think we should start as well. Um,
Yeah, the algorithm doesn't like doesn't like this kind of talk.
no, no, and I'm going to be talking about the algorithm tonight, so that should be interesting. But it's it's I think it's really like it's really important that you get the money out. And so when people ask how do you get the money out, you're going to have to put pressure on politicians to not take corporate money. And that is going to be very difficult. Now, obviously, there are grassroots candidates who have done just that, right? But you have people that have been in Congress and the Senate for decades, and for them, all they know how to do is go out there and fundraise from those wealthy corporations. That's all they know how to do. That's all they're willing to do. And I think that pressure is going to have to come from us, the people, because it's not going to come from people who are already in office. So, for example, we have progressives like in Congress right now. Now, we see Jamal Bowman got arrested last night or yesterday, because he was protesting for like voting rights. I'll talk about that later on tonight. Where's that same energy from the squad to pressure these other politicians to stop taking corporate money?
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, all the really effective solutions in this are hard. It's all these solutions are hard in there, and it's really easy to say, oh, that's too hard. That's that'll never work. And I think we're gonna have to settle in on some hard potential solutions, and push on them, and just I think we need to just get really difficult about these solutions and these plans. As far as specifics, we're talking about concentrating on the money and the corruption, and so there's at the state level, there's the ballot initiatives that you can potentially do somewhat of an end around the legislatures. The other thing that occurred to me the other night is we could be getting in the streets, in front of these state houses and just demanding that they pass public financing of campaigns. We could say, give us a bill and vote it through, and have demonstrations and get loud and get noisy in front of all of them. You can even do this in a non-ballot initiative state, but it's going to take numbers, and it's going to take people, getting loud and getting difficult about it.
Yeah, well, we have some people have done that though. I will say, like, as much as I dislike Elizabeth Warren, that is one thing about her. I will say, like, she has led those kind of protests to get the money out, and I think that's another thing too. When asking them to remove money, because this is not something they're going to be willing to do. It's just not. I think you need someone who has a large name. And it's unfortunate, but when I saw her do that, the reason why that got so much attention is because it was Elizabeth Warren who was leading it, and it was all over the news. So I think you need someone with a big name who's willing to come out and push for it, right? And I know she was really big on like campaign finance reform and stuff like that as well. But at the end of the day, I also think we need to hold some of these progressive candidates that have said they were only going to take grassroots, you know, donations. We need to hold them accountable when they, in a sneaky way, still take corporate money. Whether that money was given to the organization or that money was given to them. And I'll give an example: Justice Democrats. They took corporate money. Now, were they supposed to? No. Were we told that they would not take corporate money? Yes, we were told they wouldn't, but they did. So those people need to be held accountable. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, we shouldn't be like, well, yeah, you were progressive and you ran on Medicare for all, so we're going to go ahead and vote for you. Like, no, like, now we know this. We know that they took corporate money. So should we continue to vote for Justice Democrats? it's things like that. Like one of the things that Paula Jean Swearigan said is do not donate money to an organization. Act Blue, Justice Democrats. If you were going to donate, the money should go directly to the candidate. Because that's the thing, it's funneled through so many different like channels, and you don't know what who gave this and who gave that. There's also anonymous donors that you may not know, who that person is, and then you find out years later it was Jeffrey, Epstein, because he was known as an anonymous donor to universities here. So I think it's really important that we pay close attention to that. And I also think it's really important that when they say, especially if something's on their website, like AOC saying that she's not going to take our money and give it to establishment Democrats, and then she does that, everybody should be calling her out on that. I don't care if you're pro Bernie or not. Everybody should have called her out on that, and not enough people did.
Yeah, I mean it's straight up corruption. I mean this is what the Democratic Party is now. I mean it's hard to really find huge differences when it comes to a lot of these things between the Democrats and the Republicans. And I think it's just time for people on the left to really start treating them the same. Now we could oh, and then at the federal level, then it gets into the need for a constitutional amendment. And yeah, it's hard. I mean, I'm almost afraid to bring it up sometimes, because you just feel like people's brains shut off, because it's like, the constitutional amendment, you'll never pass that. But they passed before, when women, won the vote in the suffrage movement. I mean, what was that? That was a bunch of men voting to give the vote to women. I mean, something big happened there, and it took a lot of effort, and a lot of time. The other thing that could be very powerful, if you have something like this, something like a move to amendment to deal with money in politics, and money is not speech, corporations not people. It can be a real marker. I mean, when the force to vote fight was happening, one of the most important things about force to vote wasn't necessarily that it was going to win, although it could have started something. It could have been a real spark. It wasn't that. I mean, to me, really the most important thing was that it was a marker. It really showed you, who was on our side and who was with the billionaires. It's really as simple as that. It really should be, and it should be framed that way. And so something like a move to amend, if we got behind it, if we decided, it was, just a real marker of a way to go, that of a real path, then it can be that kind of marker where if you got a politician who's not only just for it or signing on to it, but vocally for it, pushing it, if they're not doing that, then they're on the wrong side. They are with the billionaires and the megacorps. And it's time to make them take sides. What I say.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely understand that. I mean, I saw a tweet today that AOC was asking people to donate money. And I'm like, really? Right after you like shun the Amazon protesters that you were supposed to protest with? I don't think so. So I think that it's very important that number one, we have to get the message out to more people about the money, because like I said, most people I talk to don't know about the money. They don't realize like the same companies donate to Democrats and Republicans. They don't realize just how much money these politicians are getting from them. And I feel like once you understand that, then you'll understand why they vote the way that they do, why they refuse to pass certain types of legislation. And I also think it's important for people to really pay attention to these bills. I'm hearing a lot of people like say, getting really frustrated about this voting rights bill, and they haven't even looked at the bill. They don't realize what's in that bill. And so that bill, this would be detrimental to third parties or independent candidates. When I told people back on my show, like, this is to get you to vote Democrat, that's exactly what it's designed to do. And so I think it's important that we educate people more and more about the money. But then also, I would like to do a show where I take people into open secrets so I can actually show them
Mm,
on screen who's donating to who. And that's what I did one time about Sally Mae. That's why I was telling people this, they're not going to cancel student loans. Why would they cancel student loans when you have Sally Mae, Navient, whatever the name is today? They changed their name, but they are donating to Republicans and Democrats. In fact, in 2020, they switched. They donated more to Democrats than they did Republicans.
yeah, I mean, I think there's a huge mass of people out there who can get on board with this. I think the Bernie campaign really showed that people really want this kind of change. I mean, people will sign on to it if you give them something that looks real. If you give them something that you know that looks like it's a path that can really work. I think one of the real challenges is how can we get candidates? Like I think it would be really exciting if we could get in every state or as many states as possible independent candidates for governor. That's
Mhm.
an office that you can kind of jump into. I mean, Jesse Ventura did it.
Yep.
It's also this idea of like candidates can't independent candidates can't get on the ballot. They can't get elected. Well, it has happened. I mean, I'll grant you it's not easy, but it's not impossible. Jesse Ventura, I think he either went in a green or independent, but he wasn't two party. Bernie Sanders, I mean, for all his faults, I mean, he gets elected as an independent on the regular. I mean, he managed that. I mean, I guess so. It is possible. There are other representatives sprinkled in here and there. So it is a possible thing. But to me, like a really exciting potential way to go about this would be to figure out if we could get independent candidates in various states and then get behind them. And if you have an independent candidate who sounds like the hosts on RBN, who sounds like our other favorite, real lefty hosts, I think that could go a long ways. I think there's huge potential there. It's not going to be easy, but it could happen. But we're going to have to
Yeah.
get real about it.
Well,
The
that's
money.
why, yeah, that's why I've been telling people like you really need to promote third party candidates. This is why I've been bringing them on,
Mm,
independent candidates as well. But it can't be just us. And this is the thing I want people to understand. Princess Blanding, this is a perfect example. This woman went viral on Twitter because she showed up to the debate in Virginia and they wouldn't let her debate, even though she met all the requirements. Now, she was running under the Liberation Party, and so I'm watching all like the left independent media, and they're mentioning the Democrat and the Republican that were running for governor in Virginia. No mention of Princess Blanding at all. So I think some of this is on independent media too, because why am I the only one? Well, maybe I wasn't the only one, but why was I talking about it? And then I reached out to her that same week when I saw that video to get her to come on, and she came on. Why wasn't she on everyone's show? And this, I think that's what really like frustrates me. Like you have people that have these massive platforms. They keep saying that people aren't going to vote for third party candidates because they don't know about them. Well, then introduce them to those people. You have a platform, you have that ability, that capability. Go ahead and introduce them to those third party candidates. And then maybe they will get more attention and they will get more like recognition. Like people have to understand that. So that's part of the problem is the exposure. They're not getting the exposure that they need. And I think if you have these platforms, like you owe it to yourself to do that. If you're only focusing on the two-party system and you're only bringing on people that are a part of the two-party system, that's part of the problem.
the one thing she did right was she was loud. She was angry. She
Mhm.
was she was she made no bones about how she was getting shafted and getting pushed aside. And those are the kind of people we need.
Yep.
Now, you want to talk about Alaska?
Yes.
You can share my screen. Let's see if we can make this look good here. So, this was news to me, and see if I can make this look a little better here. Alaska had a ballot initiative for ranked choice voting. and they passed it. And then, of course, the usual forces, or I think it was a couple of candidates, put it to their state Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court rejected the challenge. And Alaska is going to have ranked choice voting, and it looks like a pretty good system. It's under the system. They'll have an open primary. Oh, so this is one of the things that I really liked is that system gets rid of party primaries, at least as like a using the polling places. It always seems crazy to me. People just think this is a normal thing that the Democratic and Republican primaries have elections at public polling places. These are not public organizations. The Democratic Party is basically like a club. It's like a private club, and so why do they get to use the polling places? We should we don't need if they want to have primaries, they can have them on their own. They can do their own caucuses and whatnot. But yeah, so the new system, they start with an open primary. They have the top 4 vote getters, then advance to a second round. In the second round, they use ranked choice voting, and they have them get elected. And then you come out with a winner just through the ranked choice system. It's one of the problems I saw. We had the ranked choice voting ballot initiative in Massachusetts, and people didn't understand it. COVID was going on, and people, I think, just had too much change going on, and just weren't ready to go for it. But I think even that system was kind of weak. It really just seemed to only, like, they were still going to have primaries and do ranked choice maybe in the primary. It was even I'm still confused about it, this far down the line. But to me, the ideal ranked choice voting system would be you have one election day, period. And you do the ranked choice voting system, and you just have the election. And with the ranked choice system, it figures out all the combinations, and you come out with a winner. You don't have a spoiler effect. And you also get the advantage of having one single election day to generate excitement, to bring people out. And you do it all at once. You increase voter turnout. And so to me, that's the ideal ranked choice system. I think this Alaska system comes close to it. But what a thing, Alaska putting the rest of us to shame at this point. I mean, Maine kind of has it.
Yeah, well, Alaska's an interesting place because it's a red state, but they also have like their own UBI. It's
Through the
also
oil, right? Yeah.
yeah, it's also a very they have a heavy male population in Alaska, very few women.
Well,
And I know this because I've had friends that have gone up to Alaska just to work because the money, I guess the pay is really good there, and then come back. But it's an interesting state in the sense that it's a red state, but they still have like this UBI that they get every year, and then they pay really well apparently. It's also cold as fuck. I found that ranked choice question. Let me see.
Right,
I'm gonna yeah, the Massachusetts one.
Massachusetts one.
I'm gonna show people the results.
And it was one of the things that was crazy too was that there was a lot of mainstream political support for it. The Secretary of State Galvin was for it, and you had a lot of the political people, and I guess maybe they didn't see it as threatening as they might have because it wasn't quite as radical as it might have been. They still had their party primaries.
Yeah, so I'm gonna show people the results first.
But all that said, it would have been an improvement. It's definitely.
Yeah, it would have, but people have to understand like the way it was worded was problematic. I mean, I knew what they meant, but I also follow politics. I follow this. If you do not follow this and you didn't even know what ranked choice voting was, you would have been really confused. So basically, this is how it worked. Now, this came out 2020. It was on the ballot in 2020. A yes vote supported. Let me make this a little bit larger for you guys. Okay. A yes vote supported enacting ranked choice voting for primary and general elections for state executive officials, state legislatures, federal, congressional, and Senate seats, and certain county offices. And it would have started this year. Okay. A no vote opposed changing the existing plurality voting system to ranked choice voting for primary and general elections for state executive officials, state legislatures, federal, congressional, and Senate seats, and county offices. Now, here are the results. So 45%, whoops, here we go. 45.22% voted yes. 54.78% voted no. Most people that I spoke to voted no because they didn't understand the question. So I'm going to see if I can pull up that question really quick.
Yeah, and so what this initiative would have done is it would have kept the elections very much the same. It's just the layout of your ballot essentially would change. And instead of only being able to pick one person, you'd be able to number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and rank them. I mean, the other thing that the ranked choice people didn't do, I don't think, they didn't really go hard on showing it or selling it as an anti-corruption measure. I don't think. To me, the way you really want to sell something like this is a vote the bastards out kind of strategy of saying, this is a way to have new candidates, not necessarily the same parties, and get new people in. And I mean, another thing we can be pushing is just straight up, term limits. I mean, or maybe start threatening them with term limits if they don't give us something real on corruption and money in politics. But
I found it. Mm-hmm. Okay, I found it. There's a video. Let me see. Let me share this. Of course, there has to be an ad. All right, here we go. Because I want people to fully understand, like, why people are like, what the heck does this even mean?
Closer look at the Massachusetts ballot questions. Yesterday, we focused on question 1.
Today, we turn our attention to question 2, ranked choice voting. Let's start with the most simple question. What is ranked choice voting? Well, you get a ballot like this and rank the candidates, top choice, second, and so on. When the votes are counted, if no one gets a majority, the person in last place is out, and those voters' second choices are then counted. That process repeats until someone gets to 50%.
Our electoral system isn't working right now.
Alex Salakis is with Mass Vote, a group supporting question 2. He argues it will make politics less partisan.
You might not be the first choice of a voter, but you might be the second, you might be a third, and in the end, that could really make a difference. So it encourages candidates to appeal to the broadest base possible.
Advocates also argue ranked choice cuts down on spoiler candidates, ones who peel off enough votes to change the winner. Think Ralph Nader in 2000.
Because what happens is, whichever candidate has the least amount of support after the first round of voting, they're eliminated.
Well, ranked choice voting people often point to 1 or 2 elections that they would like to have seen undone. And that's not a reason to change your entire voting system.
Anthony Amore is a Republican who
we wouldn't want change
in Massachusetts in 2018. He opposes ranked choice and argues it could actually lead to lower turnout by confusing voters.
Is that not giving voters enough credit? Aren't we ranking our choices all the time? Right now, people are ranking their favorite Halloween candies. Isn't that something that we just do all the time as people?
You do, but when you do it, that's a great example about Halloween candy. You do it based on experience. You don't go into a store and rank candies that you've never heard of before or that you haven't ever even had time to taste. People are busy in their lives.
And Amore argues that could turn off voters and lead to more errors, especially
we wouldn't want voter errors.
We also believe that it disadvantages people who, for instance, might not.
This guy looks like a real radical.
Some studies have shown that older populations find it more confusing.
So that's question 1. Question 2, we have a piece on question 1 right now up on our website, cbsboston.com. You can go up.
So I do want to say, even though he's a Republican and he was against it, what he said at the end there was true, that people would be confused by the question. And that's exactly what happened for a lot of people. It was really wordy. It didn't make sense if you didn't really know, like, understand like what was going on or how this was really going to work. Shout out to Justin for the super chat. Just curious, RBN often claims electoralism is dead. So why are we still talking about why are we still talking about politics? So I've always said multiple times, and I've said this on my channel as well, that if you are going to vote, I think you need to vote third party or independent. So the reason why I still talk about it is because some of the people that do watch us still do want to participate in electoral politics. So I feel like those people should be given some kind of a path.
Well, I mean, the other thing I would say is this kind of cuts in down into a core question of, like, do we need a government? And I mean, I'm asking that as a serious question because it just sounds like if you're going to say, we don't need elections or electoral politics or politics, then what are we left with? I mean, personally, I think, you have to have a country with a functioning government. I mean, I'm not ready for Mad Max world. Maybe maybe some on the left are, and that's, I think that's a different conversation, and that's, an interesting conversation to have. But if we're not going to fight for elections and for democracy, then what are we left with? Where is this going to go? I think we need more democracy, but, real democracy, a democracy of people, not of dollars. The real challenge is how do we get there? And how do we get serious about getting there?
Alex M, then tell them not to vote at all. I tell people that for me, I'm not voting in the two-party system. I've been very clear about that. I don't know where you're getting that from. That being said, do I think people should support like independent or third party candidates if they do want to vote? Yes. That's who you should be voting for, not people running through the two-party system. I get what you're saying. I understand where you're coming from. But what you also have to understand is we don't have one type of viewer watching this show. We don't. We have people who still want to vote. And that's just the reality of the situation. So if they do want to vote, and they're not going to sit out electoral politics because some people still don't want to sit out. They still want to go out and vote. Then I'm going to tell them then you need to vote third party or vote independent.
Well, the other thing too is it doesn't have to be all about, electoralism and politics and whatnot. A big part of this is how do we push for these things? And to me, that means direct action. That means getting out in the streets. That means protests. That means strikes. That means a general strike. And I am 1,000%, for all of these things. When we had the March for Medicare for All, I was out there. I mean, and I tell you, it was actually fun. I mean, that was a fun march. That was a fun day. And it feels good to push for something. But if we're going to do all these things, again, it comes back to what are the demands? What exactly are we asking for? And I think until it's like a chicken and the egg thing. You need the direct action and the big protest to move this thing along. But if we're going to move this thing along, well, what's the thing? You have to have, I think we have to have some clarity on what are the demands and what are we really shooting for? What's the core thing that we need? And to me, it always comes back to the money and the top 0.1% versus the rest of us.
Thanks for the super chat, Justin. Do you believe electoralism will be more viable / reliable if we remove both the Dems and the GOP? So again, the problem is the money, though. So even if you remove the Democrats and the GOP, they could put something else in place of that and still give them corporate money. That's the problem. Like, that's what we want you to understand is that the problem at the end of the day is the money. And that's the thing. If you had it where all those candidates were just doing grassroots or just taking grassroots donations and not taking like corporate PAC money, the corporations wouldn't have as much influence over them. But because they do take that money, there's a lot of influence there, and they're going to do what their donors want them to do. That's the thing. Like, the money has to go. As long as the money is there, and this is why I told people too, the same thing about putting progressives through the Democratic Party. As long as the money is there, the Democratic Party is not going to change, no matter who you put in it. So you had the money would have to go.
The, yeah, I mean, in theory, it's more about oh, here's what I thought of. Under our current legal framework, one of the real problems is that money is speech. Corporations are people. And we're going to have to fix that, and it's a really hard nut to crack. It's a really hard fix, but if the mass of people get behind it, realize this core problem, and that it is these mega corporations versus the rest of us, and you really have to fix it at the U.S. constitutional level, because until you do that, the Supreme Court can strike down anything, really any kind of reform that you make or laws. They'll even go after like public financing campaign laws that should be like dead simple, that where you just have candidates that can draw from a pool of public money to run their campaigns, and they'll even get like challenges to that, saying oh well that robs the corporations in their speech of due process. I mean, it's ridiculous, but where you have these crazy right-wing judges, they'll go for it. Luckily we do have a fix. It's a hard fix, but the constitutional amendment process is a real thing, and it is really something we can do. But it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of solidarity. And speaking of solidarity, if you want to bring up, Savvy, this story about the Hamptons. Now this one I found really interesting. So this is out in the Hamptons. So you have kind of these two types of people in the Hamptons. You have just the average Joe who's only a millionaire or maybe a 10 millionaire. Your average Joe who can afford to be out there. And then you have the small number of the billionaires who have their places out there. And like Eric Schmidt is out there, and I think Robert Kraft, our favorite owner, he's got a place out there. And so the billionaires tend to make a lot of noise at the airport. They come in with their helis and their private jets, and so the mere average Joe millionaires don't like the noise, and so they're scroll this a bit. So they're trying to get ordinances passed to cut down on the noise, and deactivating the airport, and and changing how it's regulated, so their city council can have more control over it. And it's kind of it is kind of this hilarious story of in here they call it the 2% versus the 1%, or the have everythings versus the have a lots. I mean, I would call it more like the 1%ers versus the 0.1 percenters. I mean, I feel like there's a line of maybe maybe like 100 million. Like if you got $100 million in the bank or in assets, you're in that billionaire class essentially. You're living a very different life. The only poors that you deal with are the ones that you pay to do stuff for you. Whereas if you're just a mere millionaire, you kind of still have a little bit closer to an average life. And the reason I think that's important and interesting is that there is a potential solidarity there, in that the 1%ers, the mere millionaires, they really have more in common with us than they have with the billionaires. Now they might not think they do. I mean, they think they're in this stratosphere. They think they're great friends with Bob Kraft and Eric Schmidt and whatnot. But the billionaires look down on them and rob from them as much as they do the rest of us. And so there's this potential for what I might call it an uncomfortable solidarity between all of us. And I feel like there could be potentially some power in that, because they have money, they have a decent amount of resources, these 1%ers. And if we could convince them that, they're more on our side than on the billionaire side, and say, when we're talking about these reforms and getting the money out, I mean, a millionaire's not buying lobbyists. A millionaire's not flooding Congress with lobbyists and revolving door employees and all this stuff. I mean, those are the billionaires. Those are the megacorps. So, anyways, I just thought that was interesting as a potential concept of solidarity, which we needed, in a general way.
Yeah, they have a way of demanding that towns and cities do things that they want them to do. They do that here in Massachusetts too, by the way. Like they'll just change like town laws just because someone who is rich doesn't like something. They don't like a sign. They don't like the fact that there's a car parked outside of someone's house. I've actually saw that one in Newton, by the way. There was a car. They complained because there was a car parked outside of someone's house, not their house, the neighbor's house, and it was the neighbor's car, but they complained. And so the next thing I knew, there was a sign up on the street that said you couldn't park on that street. They will do that. They will demand things. Somebody said, I lost it.
The more you got, the more you get, right?
I kid. Sabby, in other words, our left is too nice and not willing to go the extra mile like the GOP right wing and status quo. Thanks for your response.
There may be something to that.
Kid. I look back at how people were determined to rise up last January. I'm not going to say the date because YouTube will ping me. And I thought to myself, if only we had that same fire, that same passion, like on the left. Now, I'm not saying go do that at the Capitol. That was ridiculous. But if only we had that same fire and passion and we were just as angry to get us all out, to react the same way when the DNC cheated Bernie in 2016. And when all the other candidates got together and decided to go against, Bernie Sanders, they decided to drop out of the race after Obama made that call. If only we had that same type of fire to rise up like that. So in a sense,
what I thought of when I heard about that, I was like, what, we can do that? we can invade the Capitol? Is that a thing?
Yeah,
it's like,
I know.
Why can't we at least, surround it or stand out in front of it and make noise?
Yeah, I mean,
and obviously, you never want to get, into violence and into people getting hurt. But I'm all for, being an annoying group, the squeaky wheel that gets things done.
Cam said, exactly. I supported the idea, but not the reasons. Right. Right. It just, we watched them do this to Bernie twice. And I just felt like even at like the second time, we should have been livid enough to take it to the streets.
But of course, Bernie wasn't.
Bernie
wasn't that kind of a guy.
No, I think that was another part of it too, right? Like he just kind of was like, okay, we got to get Trump out, so vote for Biden.
My good friend.
Yeah, no, agreed. Someone mentioned earlier, I can't find it, but they said we should do what Ralph Nader suggested and having a none of the. Oh, I found it. Eric Gray said, I like Ralph Nader's idea of having a none of the above option on the ballot. So it's interesting too, because the gentleman, Byron, he ran against India Walton. He won by write-in votes.
I mean, to me, the kind of, one thing it says is, a lot of people are doing that now, in that, they're just not showing up. And so that's very much the same thing. But what you see, like, I think in the bigger presidential elections, it's basically like how does it break out? Like, you have 40 anyway, you have this huge percentage. You have this certain percentage that vote Republican, for certain percentage that voted for the Democrat, and then like 60% that just didn't vote. And those, and I know you've said this before, Savvy, is you got to go after the non-voters. You have to go. Those are the people you have to get. Those are the people that Obama got. Those are the people that Bernie was, got a lot of and did very well with. And they're out there. They're not happy. They know the system's rigged. They know, this thing ain't working, and they're and it's a lot of them came out for Bernie, and the big challenge is how do we get candidates out there? How do we get a thing like this going where you have something to hope for and to vote for? And to me, it's two key things to focus on, and that is always stay on the money, what's happening with the money, like a laser focus. And the second one is that, remembering that battle. It's that top 0.1% versus the rest of us.
No, I agree. That was one of the things I think that did change, is that it was like after Bernie, I feel like the discussion about the money just kind of, it didn't seem to be as important anymore, put it that way.
I remember early in his first run, this would have been in 2016, and they were having the debates with Bernie and Hillary Clinton, and Bernie back then, in the first run, he was more fiery. He brought up the money and corruption, and I remember, at one point he said a spiel about that and about, how the money is affecting, the votes and the system. And then I remember Hillary Clinton, she looked him right in the eye and she said something like, well, money has never affected my votes. And she looked him right in the eye, and there was this look of like, are you going to go for it, buddy? Go ahead. Say it. And Bernie just kind of, shrunk down and kind of said his spiel again about, well, we got to deal with money and whatnot. And it's like, that was the moment, that was the line he wouldn't cross.
Right.
And, and that happened, and, and it's like, and here we are.
I know. All right. It's 7:00. I got to get going. I need to eat before I do my
I think you got a super chat.
Give me just a second. Greg said, Sabby has said many times that if you're going to vote third party, and Nick is for putting 15 to 20% focus on electoral politics. Agree or not, Sabby and RBN aren't contradicting themselves here. Exactly. I don't know where this came from. Like, I've said this multiple times, and I've had third party candidates on my show multiple times. So I'm not sure where you're getting that message from. Now, we all have different opinions about this on RBN, but for me, that is what I've always said. And in fact, you got to remember, I have my own channel separate from this as well. But I've been saying this for a long time. I don't know where you guys are getting this from. The super chat.
Personally, I like a 50-50 approach, but anyways.
A kid, Sabby, I truly hope in 2022 you join forces with other shows. Status Coup, The Dive, Unapologetic, RBN, Bree, JD, and others. Salute. Oh, thanks. That's really sweet. Thanks so much, a kid. Thanks for the super chat. Yeah, Status Coup. I'm going to be talking about them tonight. Actually, let me share my screen. Share. Okay, here we go. All right, so tonight on my channel, I'm going to be talking about, I can't see this window for some reason. Okay, here we go. Brianna Joy Gray talks suppression. So Bree interviewed Jordan Sheraton, and one of the things they talked about was suppression on YouTube, and it was interesting conversation. So I'm going to talk about that. Marianne Williamson schools Andrew Yang. That was an interesting interview. I want to get into that as well. They're talking about third parties, what Bernie should have done. And last but not least, Jamal Bowman was arrested. So those are the stories I'm going to cover tonight on my channel, on Sabby Sabs, and I'll be there
In
at
an
8
hour.
Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah.
All right, but other than that, I am heading out, guys. Have a good weekend. Sunday, I will continue the Ethnic Women's Liberation panel on my channel, so stay tuned for that.
What time is that one?
7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
We'll see you there.
All righty. Bye, guys.
Bye all.